Today we have thought we will look at qualitative and quantitative research approaches, just as a revision. We will look at the data collection techniques or instruments or designs. We will spend some time looking at the quantitative questionnaires, qualitative interviews, focus group, and we'll also spend some time discussing the data analysis, both quantitative and qualitative analysis of data. Again, just a reminder that any information or any data that is collected, it's of no use if it will not be supported by an analysis and interpretation, because then there's no meaning in collecting data if it's not going to be analyzed. So basically that is what we will be covering, I will be engaging on today. So I hope you are comfortable with that. And just as a way of bringing you again up to speed as to where we are with regard to the research process or the research proposal, we are at a stage where we're now reaching a real point where you're collecting data and you're analyzing data. Now, remember the last time that we were looking at the research process, we said the first thing that you look at is the research problem or the topic that needs some answers or questions that need some answers as the first step. So you've got something in your mind that you'd like answers for, or you've got a topic that you are interested in and you want to pursue it, or you want to investigate the problem because you've got a solution that you want to bring. And once you have done so, and these are not, we said these are iterative steps, so it's not like you can't go back and forward. So it's really cyclical. So you can go back, you can go forward, you can come back and fix the problem, the solution, and so forth. Now, when you have identified the problem, you then have to put together what your goal of your investigation is. In other words, what is it that you want to achieve as a goal? So how do you do that? You do that by looking at a number of objectives and so on that you'd like to achieve in terms of the investigation. Then thirdly, we say when you've now identified the problem or the topic or the question, you are bound to go and read a little bit about it, which is part of the literature review. And from there, you can also formulate a hypothesis and assumptions in order for you to go and test those assumptions or those hypotheses, the extent to which your assumptions or your allegations are proven right. And fourthly, then you come up with a research design. So here it's where you identify for yourself the approaches, the instruments, and the plan that you are going to follow to solve the problem or to collect and analyze data. The last time when we met, we were talking about what is a research design and what is a method. So we then said, look, you have to have a plan, a process that you are going to follow, and you have to indicate how you are going to collect data and how you are going to analyze data. Now, assuming that all those were answered, you are now at a stage where boots on the ground, you are now going to collect data. So you go out of your way to collect data. And of course, you collect data and organize data that is relating to the topic or the problem that you are meant to solve. So you now know exactly why you're going in a particular direction and why you're looking for what you are looking for, because now you are really collecting data. So you do have an instrument that you're going to use to collect data. So today we'll be looking at those different instruments that we can talk about when you're going out to collect data. Now, just as a way of revising the work we've done, with the quantitative researchers, because there's two types of research, which is qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative ones. Remember, this is where it's numerical and qualitative is non-numerical. So if you are a quantitative researcher, your interest at this point is to reduce data to summarize statistics. So you want to reduce the data that you've collected and summarize statistics. The average performances are of greater interest than the performance of specific individuals. Results are presented in a report in a quantitative research which uses formal scientific style with impersonal language. So here the language is impersonal and the style, of course, is scientific. So and it makes sense why the language should be impersonal, because you are not interacting directly with the participants or with those that are your research subjects. On the other hand, the qualitative researchers often construct interpretive narratives from data, and they capture the complexity of a particular phenomenon. So qualitative researchers use a more personal literary style, and often they include the participants' own language and perspective. So they will always quote the participants or the respondents directly in their write-up. That is how qualitative and quantitative researchers differ. Now, when you go out and you're going to collect data, of course, there's a method that you are going to follow. You need to ask yourself, a couple of questions. How will you actually collect the data for your study? So in other words, there's a how part. How are you going to do it? Will you conduct an experiment or a survey? Will you undertake field research, or will you focus on the reanalysis of statistics already created by others? We spoke to somebody who was saying all what they do, they look at the statistics of the previous period and they conduct the reanalysis of that. Is that what you are going to do? Perhaps you'll use more than one method as well. Are you going to use one method of collecting data, or are you going to use more than one method? That is how you need to ask yourself as you enter into the data collection. Now, let's just look at the way in which collection of data happens. Remember, whether you are going to use qualitative or quantitative, collection of data applies to all approaches and all methods and all designs. So this is where we're saying it doesn't matter whether you are doing quantitative or you're doing qualitative. All what matters is that all of them will collect data. So in quantitative research, you identify only a few variables that you want to study, and then collect data specifically related to those variables. So you look at the variable that you want to collect data, or few of them that you are studying, then you collect data specifically related to those variables. So methods of measuring each variable are first identified, they are developed and standardized, with, of course, considerable attention given to the validity and the reliability of the measurement instrument. The issue of validity and reliability as a measurement, I'm sure you will remember what each one of those symbolizes, especially in the context of quantitative research. Validity and reliability, it's very, very important. So in other words, are you measuring that which you want to measure? And are you doing it, in a consistent way that every time you do it, you get to the same kind of result? So data is often collected from a large sample, which is presumed to represent a particular population, so that generalizations can be made. So that's in a quantitative research. And the qualitative research, you operate under the assumption that reality is not easily divided into discrete, measurable variables. So you need to select a few participants who might best shed light on the phenomenon under investigation. And of course, you can either collect verbal data or non-verbal data, photography, artifacts, and so forth in a qualitative research.
Okay, so I think that one of the points that also just came to mind while we were talking about the quantitative and qualitative is that in some cases with the quantitative, that some of the researchers also, based on maybe statistics or something, they come up with a statistical model, and then they determine, okay, that is a suitable representative sample, because maybe the volume of data is too great. for them to analyze. So they go about a process where they would look at it and say, okay, fine, we will sample 10,000 records out of, let's say, 10 million records to get a sample. So I'm just thinking of that in the back of my mind, that I know that that does sometimes happen with statistics, for example.
Mm. So that is in terms of records. I hear you talking about records. Sorry, I'm trying to follow. I'm trying to follow the discussion.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, let's say, for example, that a researcher is, for example, going to say, I'm doing a study of something related to the population. Okay. And the population in question is 10 million. So I'm going to look at 10,000 as a suitable representation of the 10 million, because I cannot look at the full 10 million. It's too big.
Sure.
Yeah.
But what are we in that case? What is the point? The point is that you're talking sampling now, right? Or did I lose you some?
Correct.
Okay.
No, you're not losing me. Yeah.
Okay, so
all
in
that
sampling,
I'm pointing out is that in some cases they might limit it further, because they're also thinking, they can't look at the full sample. So statisticians, I know, like, let's say, even when they're doing census, they will say, okay, this is a representative sample and this is a good sample. So this is, what the population looks like, for example, because they can't look at every single person and interview every single South African when they're doing the census, as an example.
Okay, makes sense. It makes sense. So where are we? Are we quantitative? Are we qualitative?
I'm thinking of that in terms of the quantitative component.
Oh, okay. We can agree on that. We can agree on that. Any other reflection by anybody? When you were collecting, or when you are going to collect data, how did you go about it? What was the experience, if you have done so, and if not, what is your plan? And what is your experience, or what is your comfort or discomfort in that regard? So if I were just to ask those of you who might already have gone through the process, is there a particular lesson that you want to share, or what is the state of play at the moment? Anybody, it doesn't have to be the same person, if other people can, but you can, Edward, you can go ahead if there's nobody who's taking the chance, if you've had that experience.
So what I would say, Doctor, is that we have a situation, and I'm personally doing my research in the College of Law, which involves desktop research. We look at a lot of books, we look at case law, etc. And I think that in some cases, the process of data collection involves one to be very circumspect, because when I say data, I'm talking about, the case law, the legislation, the books, etc. Because on some things there might be many, many cases, but some of the cases are not relevant because maybe a higher court has dealt with it, and their judgment is binding on a lower court, for example. So there is a delimitation process that we go through with looking at those judgments and things that we look at. So I think that one of the reflection points that maybe I'll just mention is that we also make use of tools like with LexisNexis. They give us what they call the legal citator tool, where we can look at the judgment and say, how have other courts responded to that judgment. So we turn around and we say, yes, they followed that same principle of this case in another judgment. And that does help us, particularly with qualitative research.
So what, I mean, I hear you talking about LexisNexis.
Yes.
This is now a source. Is it a source, or how would you describe it?
It's basically a library.
Oh,
it's a legal research library.
Okay.
So it would have case law books, etc. It's like a legal library search engine, if I can put it to you that way.
So you use it for as a source, but at the same time, is there any need for you in whatever you do to interview people in the research that you're doing? Not really.
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
I won't say that the College of Law never does it, because I have read theses of some of my peers where, they have actually interviewed people, particularly with customary law, interestingly enough. Yeah. So I won't say it's never, but it's very seldom.
I see.
Mostly desktop.
Oh, that's interesting. Sakile, what is your attitude on data collection, if any, or what is your experience, or what is your comment?
So what my experience would be is that we collect, the judgments and legislation, etc. But I would find that with newer legislation, there's always going to be less case law than with older legislation. That's just been my personal experience, because obviously there hasn't been enough time for people to argue about what a particular piece of legislation means, etc. Because, ultimately that's what people go to court about. They say, okay, do we interpret the act this way or this way? So I think through the passage of time, you'll find that the older acts, there's plenty of case law. With newer acts, there isn't. I know that because in my research, for example, I'm busy looking at cybercrimes.
Yeah.
And the Cybercrimes Act was only passed in 2020. So there's hardly any case law about it.
Very relatively new.
Exactly.
So when you say it's relatively new, does it mean as a fact there's very little research done on it, or it could have been what does it mean when we all agree that it's like new? 2020 is relatively, it's not even relatively new, it's new.
Yeah, it means that time hasn't passed for there to be an entire collection of case law, so I can't say to you it's like an act that was passed in 1974.
Yeah, sure.
An act passed in 1974, there's 48 years of case law that I can look up. For this, I'm looking at maybe 2 years.
I see. Thanks for the indulgence, Edward. I think we're grateful for we will hold that if nobody wants to use the platform, don't worry, we will use it. Now let's look at a simple principle of pre-testing the questionnaire. What this means really, every questionnaire that you're going to design, you need to pre-test it. What this means really is that you need to give it to one or two people to see, it's like a review, give it to somebody to go through and listen to how they interact with the information. So no matter how carefully researchers design a data collection instrument, such as questionnaire, there's always the possibility of error and error. So in research, you need to be comfortable to get some reviews. It's actually a positive thing when somebody looks at it. It's like marking your work, you know, at school where you get somebody to do the marking of your work. So research, you know, it's strong. The strength of research is really its ability to have some reviews, and peer reviews are welcome in research. I know that other people don't like it when you look at their work with a red pen, you know, and really make it more important. So in research, that's unfortunately the opposite, because the more the reviews, the stronger the finding. So they will always make some mistake. So it doesn't matter how experienced you are, there will always be an error for, you know, I mean, an area of improvement. So, for example, you can write an ambiguous question or one that people cannot answer or commit some other violation of the rule. So it's important to do pre-testing, because somebody can bring that to your attention. So you can actually be assisted in that. The surest protection against such errors is to pre-test the questionnaire in full. You can pre-test the questionnaire in full, or you can give it to 10 people. You can give to 10 people, and it's not usually essential that the pre-test subject comprise a representative sample, although you should use people for whom the questionnaire is at least relevant. So in other words, you talk to people who will be relevant in the final collection of the data, because it's always better when people are able to participate. Give your questionnaire to several friends or colleagues to see whether they have difficulty understanding any items. A critical aspect of a questionnaire design is what we call pre-coding. So what happens here is you immediately develop the questions, and then you start developing pre-coding, so that when the answers were to come, you don't start, you know, afresh. So in other words, information collected by questionnaires is typically transformed into some type of computer format, you know, some data processing instruction that can assist you, so that you don't start the process afresh when you receive the answers from the participants. So that's very, very important to consider in the pre-testing of a questionnaire. The next element of data collections is interviews. There are basically 3 types of interviews, and this is applying more in the qualitative space. There's unstructured interviews, the semi-structured interviews, and the structured interviews. So qualitative interview is an interaction between you as a researcher and a respondent, in which you have a general plan of inquiry, which includes topics that you want to be covered, but not a set of questions that must be asked with particular ways and in a particular order. So in an interview, you have got those set of questions that you need answers for. At the same time, the qualitative interviewer, you as a researcher here, like the survey interviewer, must be fully familiar with the questions to be asked. So in other words, you need to be able, you must ask questions that you yourself, you are comfortable and familiar with, because there's nothing as difficult as getting somebody to ask you a question, yet they will not be in a position themselves to answer those questions. So in such cases, then interviews will proceed smoothly and naturally. So a qualitative interview is essentially a conversation. So when you do a qualitative interview, almost like having a conversation in which you establish a general direction for the conversation, and you pursue specific topics raised by the respondent. So ideally, the respondent does most of the talking. So you know exactly what you are dealing with. you are driving the discussion, but in a manner that allows the respondent to talk more. So ideally, if you are talking more than 5% of the time, that's probably talking too much. So if you are doing qualitative research and you are talking more than 5% of the time, you are really talking too much. So perhaps I shouldn't be saying that because I have been talking too much now, and therefore I'm more not the right qualitative interviewer. But then when we look, let's just look at the three different interview types that we spoke about. Unstructured interview, semi-structured interview, structured interview. May I just check with some of you, what is your understanding of the structured, unstructured, and semi-structured interviews? In other words, what type of an interview would you say is a structured one? Which one would you say is an unstructured one? And which one would you say is semi-structured one? I can already see semi-structured ones sitting between structured and unstructured. Anyone who wants to take a guess? Structured, unstructured, semi-structured. You can take a guess. Sakile, please go ahead, unmute yourself, and go ahead, and Joshua, you'll follow.
Good evening, Professor. Okay, with a structured interview, normally the interview will have a set of questions, and each and every person that is going to be interviewed is going to receive the same questions. That's my understanding of the structured interview. And then with unstructured interview, it's like the interviewer will just go with the flow in terms of asking questions depending on the receiver of the respondent. How is he responding to your questions, and you can just redirect your questions accordingly.
Okay.
Before I can conclude, I just want to ask something.
The semi-structured?
The semi-structured is between the two. You use both methods. Yeah, you use both methods of the unstructured and the structured interview. Your previous discussion or your previous comments were regarding the pre-testing of your questions. Yeah. So I just want to find out with the structured interview, because we've got a set of questions that we have. So normally with the ethical application, when you send organizations those preset questions to say that these are my sampling or focus group, these are the people that I want to interview, and these are the questions that I'm going to ask in each and every person that is going to participate in this interview. So you find that most of the head of organizations, that are supposed to be giving you the permission to conduct those interviews, they will always come up with their own set of questions that you have to ask, and dismiss certain of some of your questions that you've already put up front. So I'm not sure when that happens, because it looked like sometimes for me, I feel like it's like they are actually redirecting my research. And another, let's say you're interviewing 3 organizations, and in these 3 organizations, 2 of them have come up with their own questions that you have to ask in the organization, and then maybe the third organization is now actually sticking to your own questions. So how do you go about that? I know I'm actually diverting the session, but
I think no, you're not. I think you're asking the question on what we've just spoke about, on pre-testing a questionnaire, right?
Yes.
No, you're not. But I'm not sure whether I understand you correctly. You can correct me. And Joshua, you'll have to hold on a little bit here. Am I understanding you to say, look, you're going to do a structured interview? Remember, structured interview is not necessarily a questionnaire. Am I right?
It's not a questionnaire, but normally they want to
there will
the
be an
organization
interview
wants to know upfront what questions are you going to ask.
Yeah, there will be. We call it a schedule, a guide, right? There will be that guide of the number of. Say, for example, you're going to ask 5 or 6 questions.
Yes.
So you'll put your 6 questions up front. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
So then what happens?
When you put those 6 questions up front, now let's say you're going to interview 3 organizations, different organizations. So the CEOs or the executives of that organization, some of them will say, okay, in my organization, I'm not so comfortable with these questions. How about giving out these questions? How about asking these questions? They give you like a preconditioned questions. And when you look at those questions, you realize that it's like they're diverting your research. And it's obvious they're saying, if you don't...
Sakile, let's participate now. Are you saying, look, for me, I'm saying you've got 5 or 6. Let's talk about, okay, do you have a practical example where you've got 5 questions or 6 questions? How many questions are we talking about?
I'm talking about 10 questions. I had 10 questions. Then I put, it's like I'm interviewing like 4 organizations. One is a government department and the other one is an international organization. Actually, 3 are international organizations. But the 3 international organizations, they were saying, okay, from our organization, these are the questions that you can ask.
But 10 questions. Yeah, okay. We'll come to that just now. 10 questions for a structured interview is not a lot, because remember, structured interview is where you allow the person that you're interviewing to talk.
Yeah.
So isn't 10 questions a lot if you are going to take the narrative or the story from, but that's a different discussion. Now let's just go with the 10 questions, because remember, you're not asking closed question, you're asking open-ended questions.
Yes.
Yeah. So for me, 10 will be quite a lot. But the next question is, the first question that you are going to ask, remember when you do pre-testing, you're just determining whether the questions are clear, unambiguous, easy to answer by anybody, so that, that's what you are doing when you do pre-testing, right?
Yes.
So when you give me my question, those 10 questions, I go through them. When I go through them, in the pre-testing, what do? There's a question you ask and I don't understand it. Then I say to you, I don't understand this question. It's not the purpose of the pre-testing. It is, isn't it? But it's not to say, I can't say I don't understand it, therefore you must ask me this one. I think that's where you're going with your discussion, right?
Yes. It's like...
So for me, for me, it's about you clarifying ambiguous questions and maybe even making sure that we are all on the same page if you ask me a question. Because if you ask a question and I don't understand it, I'm not going to answer. So you are pre-testing, you are piloting it, so that when you then send it to anybody else, or you're now discussing those that may not necessarily be in your inner circle, you know that question has now been rephrased. So they cannot rephrase it for you, but they can tell you that you don't understand it. Can I just check if that is what you are saying is happening? They're rephrasing the questions for you. So as a result, you've got 10 questions, but some of them have been rephrased.
It's not necessarily, for me, when I look at it, it's not necessarily rephrased, because it's obvious. If you rephrase the question, my understanding is the answer might still be the same, if you know what I mean. But then if the question is like, for example, I can just give an example. The question that actually was like of concern is like, I'm actually conducting research on terrorism. and that terrorism is based in Somalia. So one of the organizations I was saying, because they're actually doing counterterrorism in Somalia. So I was asking this organization, one of the question was, what do you think will be the future of Al-Shabaab, in terms of negotiating, the path or the gateway between government and Al-Shabaab, in order maybe to come up with a concrete or agreement in terms of running the government. But it was just a short question. So, but with this one, they were saying, no, that organization said, no, this is too personal. What you can say is, so now they're running away from Al-Shabaab. What they're saying is now they're coming back into government and say, what do you think government should do in terms of 1, 2, 3? So it's like that question is, for me, I was like, it's like they're trying to run away from that question, of which I'm not sure whether it's because they are pro-government and they don't want to engage Al-Shabaab. I'm not sure. But for me, it's like now you're diverting my research. You understand?
But we will invite others to speak. But tell me, are you asking the individuals about this, or you're asking the organization? I hear you saying organizations. So are you you can't interview an organization, right?
Yeah, I'm not interviewing organizations, but I'm interviewing, like I said, this organization is the one that is actually doing counterterrorism against the Al-Shabaab. So I'm interviewing individuals, like practitioners who are on the front line. So, but it's obvious the executive of that organization had to grant permission. But when he was like proving or pre-looking at my questionnaire, the questions that I was going to ask before I could go to the participants themselves, he was like scratching other questions and said, no, you can't ask this one, you can't ask this one. But in those saying, ask this one, he's writing those questions and said, ask this question,
Oh,
so what
okay.
do you do? What do you do when you come across something like that?
Okay, there's the question.
Yeah.
There's the question. Joshua, there's the question, and you can go ahead.
Hello, how are you?
Well, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay, I don't know my thinking. When we look at structured interviews, I'm thinking, when you're having a structured interview as a researcher, you have prescribed questions that you specifically want you a certain, according to your research, what you want answered. And you have a set of questions, and you really want those questions to be answered. And when you go for the interview, you ask the questions according to the order you want them. And then when you, let's say, ask the first question, you really expecting the participant or the respondent to answer correctly. And you want to give them the opportunity to make sure they understand and the question, and they answer it according to the way you have asked it. And you're also giving them the opportunity to, you can probe it, where you find, that maybe at times they don't understand the question, but at the same time, you don't want to go off your topic, so that you end up asking things that were not intended in your research. And it will be like, you are now wasting time in the research instead of asking the very things that you want. And so it's so structured to who you want to ask to and what questions you want to ask. And when it comes to semi-structured, I think it's almost like structured, but there, as a researcher, you have a leeway when you find out, that, remember, when you're doing interviews in qualitative, research, you want to hear it from the person, the interviewee, their actual, experience. So there are times when you can find, when you are interviewing them, that, in your semi-structure, that you see that they're not giving what you want, and, they are diverting from what you're asking. Then you can probe more and ask, okay, try to rephrase the question. You've got a leeway to rephrase so that at least they understand, but you are sticking to what you want. That's what I think maybe semi-structured interviews are like. But in an unstructured, I think that's where you can there's no a prescribed order. You are asking, you know what you want to ask, but then you have room for you to maneuver and try to probe more for someone to come up exactly with what you want, and you go in a different direction, or when you feel that they are stuck with the question, and you can a little bit maybe divert a little bit to bring their attention, so that at least then you bring them back to what you want to find out, and you ask them, so you have that leeway. That's how I understand. Maybe I'm wrong, or I don't know.
So how do you answer the question by Sakile that you give as a pre-test now? You give questions and then somebody comes and change the question.
Oh, can you come again? I didn't get you properly.
Her question is, somebody comes and change the questions now.
Someone coming to change your questions as a researcher.
Remember,
to change the question.
I give about 5 people my prepared questions. As you said, structured
Okay.
is that you've got prepared questions, and they
Mhm.
come and they give you their own questions that they sort of tell you which one to ask and which one not to ask. What is your comment on that?
I think that wonder, if someone comes and change, they say you must ask this, then it's now the research is irrelevant, because you, when you want to do your research, you've got a specific question you want answered. So if someone tells you and they give you another question to ask, which is not in line with what you want to find out, then I think there it might be very difficult for you.
Okay, so it's difficult, yes, but what do I do?
I think I'll explain to that person, okay, I'll look at the question and see exactly what they're saying, and to see where I can make changes, but my changes must not influence, must not change the course of my research. So in my question, my main question that I want answered, and remember, because if someone wants me to ask certain things that are not so I'll rather say, okay, explain to the person that, okay, fine, the reason why I'm trying to ask this question is for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But anyway, I understand what you're saying, but at least maybe I can add this, or maybe I can separate this, as long as it is in line with my main question.
Okay, Joel, the discussion is very interesting.
I think it's a very interesting discussion, because the way that I'm looking at it is I'm also remembering what we discussed previously. And when we were looking at how the questionnaires are set up, there were 2 principles that came forth. And I just want to test those principles.
Well, I'm not sure whether it's you, but we seem to be struggling to hear you clearly.
I don't think it's on my side, because I'm also hearing the background noise.
Oh, you're hearing there's some. Could it be that somebody maybe hasn't unmuted their mic? Okay, maybe proceed. It sounds like it's better now.
So I think that the principle that we discussed in some of the previous sessions also just came to mind while Joshua was talking, and I think that there were 2 points. So the one point is that the participation of any person that answers is fundamentally voluntary, right? So they are not obligated to answer. So that was the first point that came to mind. The second point is that the person who is interviewing should explain well what is the purpose of this interview that they are requesting the voluntary participation in. Now, my guidance would be, when a person is now saying, okay, fine, I'm answering something else that is not actually being asked of him or her, that he or she should be brought back and told, well, listen, you know what? The purpose of this interview is this. So if you are answering about something else, you're not actually answering the question, because the purpose of this study is the following. And thank you for your voluntary participation. we also have to understand that in some instances they might not want to disclose certain information, be it an organization, because there might be confidentiality or something like that. Sometimes that might play a factor.
Thank you. I think this is very interesting. And maybe coming back to Sakile, you need to remember that when you do pre-testing or when you are piloting a question, it's really to establish clarity and ambiguity, not so much whether or not I'm going to participate on. I mean, if you, and I think all the points that they're making here are helpful in that it is not always that the organization that you want to interview must tell you what to ask. Yes, of course, they may tell you the question if you have asked a question that is not very clear to them. So, and at the end of the day, it also goes to how did you select the participants, because the selection of participants, if it's empirical and if it's done correctly, methodologically, there shouldn't be a problem. Because all what you're trying to do is you're trying to ask a question where you need an answer. Now, if somebody says, I don't understand what you mean by the question, surely it's not to say, oh, maybe ask it this way, because then that's something else. So I hope this discussion has been not only able to help you, but maybe to help us in summarizing the objective of a pre-testing and the final product. Because after you have done the pre-testing, the next process is to then finalize the question. So you may still stick to your questions because you've already created codes on how or what you would expect. And especially if it's a qualitative, you may already start picking up some thematic issues that you're going to base your analysis on. However, there's nothing wrong in somebody saying, I don't understand this question, because maybe it's an irrelevant question, because there are also questions that may not be relevant to an organization. And somebody can bring that to your attention during your pre-testing. And every time they bring it to your attention, they mean improve on your questions or make it more relevant to the environment that you are investigating or the phenomenon that you are investigating. So yes, there's an element of voluntary participation. So you may just as well accept the input and move on with your questions, if that is helpful to you, Sakile.
Yeah, Professor, I get your point. I just want to see if I have to ask these questions to you, to the forum, and see whether maybe they might be able to see the difference. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm stereotype. I mean, I'm just looking at what I want, and that's it. So my question was. Let me just go back to my question. My question was that one of the last question that I asked on this whatever questions that I was sending is, what do you think should be done? It's obvious this is based, it's not for the organization, but the practitioners who are involved in this counterterrorism. I said, what do you think should be done to engage Al-Shabaab in negotiating with the ruling government? And then this organization said,
yeah, you want to solicit their views, their opinions, their input.
Yeah.
So you can still.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, I think what you are saying, maybe in a roundabout way, is that you can still ask the question, even if, remember, we are saying with pre-testing, is you are testing before you actually implement your question. So you can still ask the question to the practitioners, because my understanding is the tone of what I'm hearing is that this is going to be qualitative. So you're going to be asking.
Yeah, it's qualitative, yes.
Yes, so you're going to be asking individuals. So somebody might say, I've got no view about it. Somebody might have a view about it. Somebody might have different opinions about it. So that's basically, that will still be the question.
Yeah, but that's why this organization says now what I should say instead of that question. I should ask, what do you think should be the long-term solution for Al-Shabaab?
Yeah, but are they suggesting that as a question for you,
Yes.
and you don't agree with the question.
It's obvious. It's taking me out of what I'm trying to research or to find out exactly what is happening. So when you say what is the long-term solution, this question should go to El Shabab. What is the long-term solution for El Shabab? It should be to El Shabab. And it's obvious I'm not going to interview El Shabab. I'm interviewing the counter, the one who are actually on the forefront, you know.
Yes, but yeah, I think maybe we are not having the full context of the discussion, but we are saying yes, it's a proposal that they are giving you, but you don't necessarily have to accept it, isn't it?
Accept it.
Yes, because you have a particular objective that you want to achieve, so you can actually accept. You can actually be thankful for the fact that I'm saying I said to you the question is unambiguous in my answer, and you can actually leave me out because I may be the irrelevant person to deal with that question, because maybe it's contextually I'm not the right person. So you don't then change the question because somebody irrelevant has said something unambiguous, because some of the issues are contextual. So you need to be able to be in that environment to understand how it must be done. So it doesn't mean you are obliged to take the question if that's what your question is all about.
Okay, Professor, thank you very much.
Yeah, but please also engage your promoter on that, because your promoter will have a lot more intimate and close knowledge of the proposals and your sampling strategies and all that. We are only taking it at face value on what you are saying. Yeah. So yeah, we may not know exactly the depth of it, but for us it's just a principle discussion where we say, yes, you take note of the inputs by the people that you are piloting your questionnaire with, but you don't necessarily have to take it if you realize that I'm the one who do not understand the question myself. Not because the question is ambiguous, but it could as well be that I'm not familiar. I mean, if I listen to Joel talking about case studies, Nexus, Lexus, and all that, I have very limited understanding of that. So I'm careful not to twist and disagree from the point where she is sitting, closely with the information than I am. So we only able to touch the surface in our engagement, but you will know more and know better about the environment. If that's fine with you, Sakile.
Okay, it's fine. Thank you, professors, and thank you for all the inputs.
You're welcome. We have already shared, all of us, the unstructured and semi-structured and structured interview, and I think I want to agree with you that in an unstructured interview, these are interviews that are not conducted according to a pre-structured interview guide. So you don't have an interview guide here. One question leads to another, and you just go with the flow, basically. It provides the richest source of data for theory building, and it gives participants more control over the course of the interview. The semi-structured interviews, here it follows standard questions with one or more individually tailored questions to get clarification and to probe reasoning. Some topics are chosen before beginning the research based on the literature or practice. So you prepare some of the topics up front, and many researchers, of course, feel more comfortable having a list of topics to fall back on. Now you go there already with a list of topics that, in an event that you get some participants who are not talkative, so you ask one question and they give you an answer and that's it. So in that case, what do? They prepare a list of topics. It's like what you do at UNISA. You may get into a facilitation and students don't want to engage. Now, if you have not prepared enough topics for the day, then it's like, oh, child time. We can't say anything more because students don't want to participate. They don't want to talk, and you've got 2 hours to yourself. So sometimes it helps to have a semi-structured interview where you've got different topics that you want to cover in an event that participants don't want to talk for a number of reasons, because some may not be talkative, but others may not want to talk because of the nature of the the investigation that you are conducting. Structured interview, here you really bring an interview guide. An interview guide is basically a set of questions that you have put together that you want to ask and you want to put before the participants and nothing more. So if you've got 10 questions, that means you are going to ask 10 questions. But as I said, Sakile, my view is 10 questions is more. It's a lot. It's a lot because remember here you're taking everything in. You're recording the conversation and everything in that you need to be recorded. So it can be quite daunting from a documentation point of view because you are recording everything. So the lesser the question, the better. Now, in the other technique or a data collection tool that you can think about is a focus group. The focus group method is essentially a qualitative method and is based on either structured, semi-structured, or unstructured interview. Now, this method allows you to question several individuals systematically and simultaneously. So here, the technique is frequently used in political and market research. 5 to 15 participants are brought together in a private, comfortable environment to engage in a guided discussion of some topic. So you put the topic, and there's about 5 to 15 participants that you want them to talk about the topic that you have brought to them. So as they engage, you are beginning to get insight on the very same topic, and you give them an opportunity to comment, themselves. So it consists of individuals selected and assembled to discuss and comment from personal experiences, the topic that is the subject of the research. So you throw the question to them and they all talk about it. So it's particularly suited for obtaining several perspectives about the same topic. So throw it in and you allow people to talk about it so that you can get different perspectives about the same topic. The benefits include gaining insight into people's shared understanding and the ways in which individuals are influenced by others in a group situation. So here, what matters is the role, your role as a researcher, as a moderator. It's important that you need to have good, group leadership and interpersonal skills so that you can steer the discussion properly. Now let's look at data analysis. Now, remember you are collecting data using either those questionnaires or those interviews, whether structured, unstructured, and semi-structured, and the focus group. So those are some of the techniques that you can use to collect data. So what then do you do with the data? You need to analyze it. Now, when you are going to analyze the data, it's important to indicate the kind of analysis that you plan to conduct. So you need to know what is my plan that that I'm going to rely on in analyzing the data. You need to spell out the purpose and the logic of your analysis. Are you interested in precise description, or do you intend to explain why things are the way they are, because remember there's exploratory, there's descriptive research, or do you plan to account for variations in some quality, e.g., why some students are more liberal than others? That's the variations that you can account for. In other words, are you doing some comparative analysis, or what possible explanatory variables will your analysis consider? And how will you know if you have explained variations adequately? So in other words, you need to answer these sets of questions in the data analysis environment. Now, all research requires logical reasoning. Quantitative researchers, again, when you're talking analysis, it applies to both qualitative and qualitative, both quant and qual. Now, with qualitative researchers, they rely more heavily on deductive reasoning, beginning with certain premises, e.g., where you test the hypothesis and you draw logical conclusions from them. They try to maintain objectivity in their data analysis, conducting predetermined statistical procedures, and they use relatively objective criteria to evaluate the outcomes of the procedures. That's in the quantitative research design. Whilst on the other hand, if you look at the qualitative research design, you make use of inductive reasoning, many specific observation, and you draw inferences about larger and more general phenomenon. So in a qualitative research, data analysis is more subjective in nature because it's based on your interaction with participants and respondents to your research study. They scrutinize the body of data in search of patterns subjectively identified that the data reflects. So in other words, in a qualitative research, you have been immersed with the data. So you've got an element of subjectivity yourself because you're part of the data as well. Now, why do we then go back to the inductive theory or logic? Just for you to remember, inductive logic deals with drawing conclusions from data or observation. So nothing else but data dictate how you want to draw conclusions. So you use data or your observation to draw the data. It is the primary logical method upon which science is based. You use nothing else but the data and the observations. It's a fundamental presupposition that underlines induction is that the universe is ordered and is governed by rules or laws. So with inductive logic, theory is the outcome of research. And the process of induction involves drawing generalizable inferences out of observation. Inductive reasoning begins not with a pre-established truth or assumption, but instead with an observation. So you rely on observation and data dictates, how you're dealing with this. So in inductive reasoning, people use specific instances or occurrences to draw conclusion about the entire classes of objects or events. They observe a sample and then they draw conclusions about the larger population from which the sample has been taken. So that's where you also consider generalization. On the other hand, if you look at the deductive theory or the deductive logic, it represents the most common view of the nature of the relationship between theory and research. It's based on what is known about the particular domain. And it moves from the general to specific. It moves from one, a pattern that might be logically or theoretically expected, to two, observation that test whether the expected pattern actually occurs. Notice that deduction begins with the why and it moves to whether, whereas the induction moves in the opposite direction, meaning it moves with the whether and then to the why. So it's whether this and why is it the way it is. So that is just the difference between deductive and inductive logic. So deductive logic provides the basis for mathematical proofs in mathematics, physics, and related disciplines. It's also extremely valuable for generating research hypotheses and testing theories. So it's important in a hypothesis testing and theory testing to rely on deductive theory or deductive logic. So quantitative data analysis, ladies and gentlemen, this is where numerical representation and manipulation of observation for the purpose of describing and explaining the phenomena that those observations reflect. Now, quantitative analysis is almost always handled by computer programs. Some of you might already be familiar with it, the statistical package for the social science, SPS as they call it. So please find out whether at your workplace or at the university, they can allow you access for some of the computer programs that you can use to analyze quantitative data. Institutions do have licenses that they allow students to use for analyzing of their data. For those programs to work their magic, they must be able to read the data collected in research. So if you've conducted a survey, some of your data are inherently numerical, e.g. age or income. May I just find out from some of you, how did you collect quantitative data, and how did you analyze it? If I may start another round of engagement quickly. Anybody who has collected data and analyzed data, quantitative data maybe, and what system or what program are they using to analyze data, or intend to use, or have they used in the analysis of data? Let's pause here and let me just hear if there's anybody who's willing to share. Anyone willing to share how and what they've used or what they are going to use to collect or analyze quantitative data? Or what is it that you are using, even at the workplace where you work or where you study at the moment, or any work that you have done before which involved quantitative data analysis? Anyone who wants to take a gamble? Mohulushi, is it Pamela? You haven't said much today. You wanna take a chance? Pamela?
I'm just checking, but I was going to use. I haven't done the research. It's still a proposal, so I was thinking of doing phenomenology and discourse analysis.
Okay.
Yes, because I wasn't
why
sure yet of
why
which
are you
one
thinking
to.
about that?
Sorry, come again.
No, I'm just saying, why are you thinking about discourse analysis?
I was thinking, isn't it when you do for qualitative research, discourse analysis, you group the wording that you're using? Because I'm going to be investigating the different experiences that people had during the COVID pandemic. So I'm looking at the different themes that appear of how people experienced it. So I was thinking that would be a better way, like, of analyzing it.
Okay. You say you're still working on your proposal, right?
Yes, I'm still working on it. That's why for now I'm still thinking of either discourse analysis or phenomenology.
Okay. Wow,
Yeah.
those are big words. We would like we wish you could talk more to us about those, because it's like, wow, phenomenology and discourse analysis and all that.
Yes,
Uh,
discourse analysis, as I've already explained, you find like different keywords and then you group them and find how many times they've appeared in the interviews.
okay.
And then with phenomenology, you find, I can say it's more like a broader sense of it. In discourse analysis, you can calculate it at the end, but with phenomenology, you look at different, should I say, themes or ideas that appear frequently.
Okay.
As yes, you use like different ideas of what people thought. It gives you a deeper understanding of people's feelings and emotions.
I see.
Yes, I don't know if I'm correct, but I'm still trying to get into it.
Great stuff.
Yes.
Great stuff. Innocentia, what do you have to say? I mean, we just hear brilliant concepts here being thrown around, phenomenology and discourse analysis. What do you have to say for yourself? Innocentia, anything from your side?
Good evening, everyone. I just entered the house, so I'm just trying to get what is it that you've been saying.
You're
But
trying
now,
to get your head around.
yes, because I just arrived.
Oh, sorry, man.
Yeah, but okay, fine.
But you are allowed
sorry?
to have an opinion. We're giving you
Oh,
time
okay.
to raise your opinion.
Oh, okay. From my study, I've tried to use descriptive study,
Okay.
whereby I'm going to use questionnaires to gather the information. So
You're
in
going to
terms
use
of
you're going to use the what?
The questionnaires. Going to
Oh,
use the
okay.
questionnaires, yes, because like you said, you're talking about the qualitative part.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, because for qualitative part, I've decided to use that the questionnaires to gather my data using the questionnaires,
But you know
which is
that
going
it
to be
may not
part of the survey.
In
Sorry?
you know that it might not be appropriate to use a questionnaire in a qualitative study.
No, I say quantitative.
Or quantitative. Are you going to use
Yes.
only a questionnaire, or you're going to use mixed methods? Are you going to use both?
Yes. I'm going to use mixed methods.
Okay.
Yeah, because now, I was trying to answer the one whereby you were talking about the quantitative.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yes,
No,
that part.
sorry, it's me who I think I misunderstood. I misheard you.
Oh, okay. No, it's fine, Prof. Yeah, because
Okay,
now, okay, I'm going.
So that's where at what stage is your proposal?
Currently, I'm doing the research methodology part, the chapter.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm doing
So this is the
chapter.
appropriate engagement for you.
Yes, it is. Although I haven't started to gather information, I'm just designing. For now, I'm designing my methodology. Okay, for quality, I'm going to use the qualitative. Although I'm not so familiar about the quantitative, because previously I used qualitative.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm going. I've decided to use the descriptive statistic or descriptive approach, whereby
Okay.
I'm going to where I'm going to arrange my data. Then I'm going to use the SPSS.
Oh, okay.
Although I'm still learning I'm still learning the SPSS because I've been attending several workshops whereby they were talking about the SPSS. I'm not so familiar about it. Yes, I'm not. Yes. Yeah, but then I've decided to use the SPSS.
Okay. Do you have access to it? How are you going to? Sorry, I'm putting on the spot.
Oh no, it's fine, Prof. Yeah, because during the workshop that I attended, they gave us an access to use the SPSS.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah. So I'm going to use that one. Yeah, the SPSS, and also going to use the graphs in order to describe my data.
Okay, all right. So you would be capturing or populating your data that you collected into the SPSS program, so that at least you can get some graphs to present your data.
Yes, Prof. That's what I'm intending to do.
Okay.
So now can I talk about the qualitative, or focusing?
Yeah.
For my qualitative, I'm going to use
actually, so we understand you to be saying you are going to do mixed methods, right? Basically, you're going to collect quantitative data and qualitative data.
Yes, Prof. I'm going to use qualitative and quantitative.
Great.
Yes, of which during my study is going to focus more on qualitative.
Yeah.
Because now From my, I'm going to use the sequential approach.
Okay.
Whereby, I'm going to sequential explanatory, whereby I'm going to use the qualitative part in order to describe my quantitative data. I'm not sure if I'm right there. Yes, Prof.
No, you are. You are.
Yeah. So that's why I'm saying mine is going to be more on qualitative, more than the quantity. It's going to be quanti.
Yeah, it can also be tongue. The tongue can also be twisted if you.
Yeah. You can't hear me. You can't hear me.
No, I'm saying the tongue can be sometimes twisted when you say qual, and then it sounds like quan, and at least. But I'm hearing you.
Oh, quali and quanti.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Yeah. So for that for qualitative, I'm going to use the Atlas TI.
Okay.
From the Atlas TI, it's whereby I'm going to arrange the themes, then organize them so as to understand my data.
I see. Sound like you've got a very good plan going there in Essentia, and hopefully we'll find enough time at some point to be dazzled by you when the proposal is up and running. So but good luck.
Okay, Prof, I still need your assistance or your guidance in that.
No, I'm sure this platform will be available as we use it to guide each other, to argue with each other, to debate with each other, and maybe to also assist each other, because that's basically what UNISA has created for all of us. So yes, we'll be able to use the platform, and Godfrey's listening as well.
Oh, now, okay, so like I've said, from the qualitative, I'm going to arrange the themes.
Okay.
So the themes is for the reason for arranging them is to enable the researcher to understand, to compile a rich data.
When are you expected to submit your proposal, if there is an expectation for you to do so, or there's none?
Oh no, because like I've said, I'm still busy with the chapter. It's chapter 4 for research methodology.
Yeah. So
I've passed the stage. The date is supposed to be November.
Oh, I see.
But no specific date. Yeah, but it's supposed to be.
So are you ahead? Are you ahead of it, or you are not necessarily ahead of the schedule?
For now, no. I think because for now I've already organized my methodology.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I've organized, although I haven't done the data analysis, because I'm still trying to read through books about the data analysis, because I'm on that part for data analysis.
I see.
Just trying to understand, especially the quantitative part.
All right. Let's see if this process that we have now decided to embark on will be of any assistance to you. Hopefully it is, because we would like it to be relevant to the work that you are doing. So hopefully it will assist. So let's just go ahead and see if you will pick up one or two elements that may be of assistance going forward. So when you look at the quantitative analysis, one of the first thing we look at the univariate analysis. Uni obviously is the simplest form of quantitative analysis. It involves describing a case in terms of a single variable, especially the distribution of attributes that it comprises. So here is just one variable that you're going to be looking at, and that's what the analysis is based on. Now, there's a function of statistics. We all know that statistics have two major functions. There can be more, perhaps, as things grow. Some statistics describe what the data look like, where their center or the midpoint is, how broadly they are spread, and how closely two or more variables within the data are intercorrelated. So you'll sometimes see that there's a midpoint, there's a center, or how they are spread, or how closely two or more variables within the data are intercorrelated. You know, is there any correlation between drugs and crime, you know, as variables? So sometimes that's what you get from a statistics. Such statistics are appropriately called descriptive statistics. They tell us that there is, you know, a center point as to crime or alcohol or drugs, or, you know, the usual type of examples that you can think about in a descriptive statistics. Other statistics known as inferential statistics serve a different purpose. They allow researchers to draw inferences about large populations by collecting data on relatively small samples. So more generally, inferential statistics involve using one or more small sample and then estimating the characteristics of the population from which each sample has been drawn. So you use a sample and then you do an estimation based on that. The bivariate analysis, in contrast to univariate analysis, here it involves two variables. In this respect, the comparison constitutes a kind of bivariate analysis. That is the analysis of two variables that simultaneously. As with univariate analysis, the purpose of the subgroup comparison is largely descriptive. Most bivariate analysis in social research has another element, determining relationship between the variables themselves. So univariate analysis and subgroup comparison focus on describing the people or other units of analysis under study, whereas bivariate analysis focus on the variables and the empirical relationships. So that's where the difference is between the bivariate and the univariate. The multivariate is about variables, remember? Here the analysis of the simultaneous relationship among several variables. So here you've got a number of variables, examining simultaneously the effects of age, gender, class, on religiosity, for example, is an example of a multivariate analysis. So here you're looking at the multiple or several variables. And the frequency distribution, a description of number of times the various attributes of a variable are observed in a sample. For example, the report that 53% of a sample were men and 47% were women would be a simple example of a frequency distribution. So if you're working on 100% and you look at how many of the 100%, how many were men and how many were women, and if it then turns out 53% of a sample were men, 47% of the sample were women, you are looking at a frequency distribution there. There's also a computer spreadsheet that is used to organize and analyze data. The process of organizing large amounts of data was once a tedious and time-consuming task. I mean, there would be like volumes and reams of data that you were sitting with some time back. But now computers have made the process much simpler and more efficient. One important tool that you can use to organize and to analyze data is an electronic spreadsheet, which is a software program that enables you to enter and manipulate data in two-dimensional table. Some of you are now familiar with the spreadsheet software, which is Microsoft Excel, but other software are also available as well. if you can familiarize yourself with. But I think the Microsoft Excel is working very well insofar as organizing and analyzing data if you are familiar with it. Using statistical software packages, as we spoke earlier, one of the several statistical software packages now that are widely available for use on personal computers are the SPSS. There are other types like your SAS, your SayStat, your Minitab, your Statistica, which can also be used for analyzing data. Such packages have several advantages. We may speak about them, but there might be more. Many of these programs include a wide variety of statistical procedures. They can easily handle large data sets, multiple variables, and missing data points. So they make life easy, really. They are user-friendly. As statistical software programs become increasingly powerful, they also become more user-friendly. So they're easy to use in some instances. There are a lot of programs and training, capacity-building programs that are available for some of these programs. The programs are logical and easy to follow, and results are presented in an easy-to-read table format because they do that for you. Selections of the proper statistics and interpretation of the results are therefore still left to the researcher to consider. So you still have to do the selection of the statistics and the interpretation. So on assumption testing, a common feature of statistical software package is to test for characteristics that might violate assumptions on which a parametric statistical procedure is based. There are also issues around graphics, and I think I had you saying that you're going to present your information as part of the statistical program that allow you to summarize and display data in tables by, pie chart or bar diagram or statistics earlier on. I think it was Innocentia that was talking about that. The fact that that's how she's gonna present the data in future in a proposal. So those are some of the software that are available, for use. On the other hand, we can then start talking about the qualitative data analysis. But maybe before we do that, let me check if there's a question from any one of you at the moment. Is there anyone who wants to ask a question on the quantitative data analysis? I don't think we can all be qualitative data analysts. Any question, any input? Any question, any comment, any inputs from any one of you on the quantitative data analysis? Wow, so much silence.
I just wanted to say I don't have a lot of input on quantitative because I'm not doing quantitative. That is why I'm very silent.
Maybe that's why you are silent.
I'm happy to talk a lot about qualitative.
I had somebody talking about discourse analysis. I thought this is where we really need to be talking more. What analysis are you using, Joel?
Qualitative.
But what is the, yes, it's qualitative analysis, but what do you use?
What do you mean by that question?
Remember, if you go quantitative, you're going to use the statistical program that we are talking about, and then qualitative as well, you'll have tools. I want to know which tools are you using?
Yeah, so I think one of the tools that I spoke about earlier was LexisNexis. That is one such tool
Okay.
where we look at the legal, what they call the legal citator. That tells us
Yeah.
how the courts have responded to case law. I know I spoke about that one earlier.
Yeah.
But in general, I wouldn't say that there are a lot of tools per se. They're more libraries that we're searching for information.
Okay.
If I could put it to you that way. And the fact is also a principle that is followed in the field of law. And the principle is known, there's a Latin term for it, which is stare decisis, but what that means is basically a precedent, right? So we look at what is the precedence of the law, and then we look at it and we say, what is the highest court's ruling on this matter? So, for example, the courts have layers where the highest court is, for example, the Constitutional Court, you have the Supreme Court of Appeal, and the various high courts. So we would first establish now, is there a Constitutional Court case on this matter, yes or no? If there isn't, then we would in turn go to the Supreme Court of Appeals judgments, and then that would follow by the High Court judgments. So that is just one of the principles we use.
Okay, so let me check if I understand the idea, the discussion. You collect information, so you're sitting with information that you collected, and now I want to know, how do you analyze that information? Do you go through, I'm looking at a tool.
Yeah, so what it would be is it would be a printout of the judgment, for example, because courts would have published their judgments. You get reported cases and it says, okay, fine, this is the matter between so-and-so versus so-and-so, and this is what the court ruled. So it is a hard copy of that, or it could be electronic, because there are also electronic versions nowadays of judgments available on the internet in various libraries.
Mm-hmm. So basically you will, so you go, what is, in other words, what I'm trying to check, and please pardon me if I'm not understanding the legal process of analysis. What did you use when you're sitting with cases? I can imagine that you're reading them, but at what point do you then do the analysis? What do you use to analyze? Do you read each one of them? Do you put them into? Do you capture the thematic areas? How do you do the analysis?
Okay, so it would involve the reading of them, all right? But when we analyze cases in terms of the method that we would do, we would say, through our reading, have we understood what is the legal question? Because remember, with every case that goes before any court, there is always a legal question. So, for example, did so-and-so commit the crime? Yes or no?
Yeah.
What is the evidence that he committed it? Okay, so there's a question, and then there would be the answers and the application of the law to say, okay, well, this conduct, it is unlawful, it is intentional, and so, contravened the section of this act, which required that he, for example, did he drive his motor vehicle at 60 kilometers an hour on a public road? And he drove his at 120. So we would look for those thematic areas in the judgment and then say, okay, what is the legal question? What is the legal approach taken by the court? And why did they reason that? What was their finding based on the legal principles?
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. That helps.
Okay.
Well, let's see if it helps others as well. I think I must not hoard the the space. But I think is it okay? Is Pamela, your hand is up? Go ahead.
I don't know if I'm correct. You'll correct me. So I was thinking, just guessing, what Joel is talking about, if you're taking material from books and journals and all that, I'm not sure if it falls under content analysis or thematic analysis. So I was just thinking maybe it's somewhere around that. Can you hear me?
I think it's both. I think it's both, Pamela, because remember that you will analyze the content, but then in your analyzing the content, you're looking for certain things, right?
Mhm.
So if, let's say, we used an example of a very famous case in South Africa, which is State versus Makwanyane, right? And that case had to do with, is it constitutional for there to be the death penalty in South Africa? That is what that case is about. Then we would say, okay, so some of the themes that we pick up there is that there is a right to life as a constitutional principle. And we follow that theme in that judgment. And then we will see, okay, but there's also the rights to maybe dignity and so forth. And then we will say, okay, but there's also the public interest, right? Because many people are saying, but if we don't have the death penalty, what does it mean in terms of the different theories of punishment that is consistent in our criminal law that says, you know what, there needs to be restorative, there needs to be rehabilitative, etc., all those different theories of punishment. So probably a researcher would look at it and say, when I read that judgment, do I see those themes coming out of that judgment? Yeah.
Okay.
Hope it helps.
Yeah, I think oh, sorry, was I muted? Yeah, I think that is a classic examples of internal validity out there and validity there for me. Joseph, thank you very much, because all what you're saying is, after having looked at all these, are you able to see, I mean, if you put a hypothesis, that's where you now look at it and say, you go and investigate, you come back, you confirm whether or not, any of those principles exist. And if they do exist, it means your hypothesis is confirmed. If you don't get any of those, then it means your hypothesis is not confirmed. It doesn't mean your research is wrong. It simply means, so that's the way of interpreting research. Now, that is very helpful, because I think we were straddling between qualitative and quantitative data analysis, depending on what the approach is that each one of you are following. Now, analysis is both an art and a science. So you really, as a student, need to spend time, working on analysis, because it's important for art and science. I always find it very difficult to follow some people who are given huge amount of time to commentate, and then they are classified as analysts. Now, when you listen to the analysis, you're not able to get the facts. You're not able to really put the data together, that which is being analyzed. So it's very difficult to really follow some of the discussion that you might be very aware of, that, it's such a term that they say you are a legal analyst, a political analyst, what have you. So I think it's something that we should be very, jealous about, that not every discussion really must go into analysis. Some can just be commentary, because people are really making comment. I cannot imagine if somebody tells us, especially within the political space, with due respect to politicians on this platform, I sometimes find that the discussion is not as deep as it's required to be. It's more about who has done what and who's doing what, or who's intending to do what. But there's very little analysis on, in terms of what are the facts of what we are talking about. So I think you, as researchers, you really need to be very aware of the limitations that we are now being subjected to, where one comment about situation happening in the Western Cape or in the bar is then being sent to be, well, here is an analysis, when in actual fact very little information has been collected. But that is a discussion for another day. But for you to conduct analysis, it is important that we understand that the art aspect has to do with the creative use of procedures to solve analytic problems. That's one. The ability to construct a coherent and explanatory theory from data, a theory that feels right to the researcher. To bring the art aspect into analysis, a researcher must remain flexible in his use of procedures. Not all content analysis result in counting. So it's not as if all what you should be doing is content analysis is about counting. So sometimes a qualitative assessment of the material is most appropriate. So in the grounded theory tradition, you begin with an examination of the data, which may yield a general hypothesis. Qualitative analysis is the non-numerical examination and interpretation of observations for the purpose of discovering underlying meaning and patterns of relationship. So that's what it is. And in this, we use coding. Coding is the key process in the analysis of qualitative social research data. And it sort of classifies and categorizes individual pieces of data coupled with some kind of retrieval system. So coding is the process of transforming raw data into a standardized form. Codes are text or labels that attach meaning to the raw data. And coding is denoting concept to stand for data. So when you do coding, you really put text and you really put labels, because you are going to use that in order to compile or to categorize the piece of data, that must make sense eventually. So that is one of the areas that we can at least talk about now in terms of coding, which is part of the qualitative data analysis technique, a tool that we can think about. Anyone who has used coding in their research work that they've already done, or heard about it or studied it and they intend to use it, do you mind to share your experiences in that regard? Anyone? No one. Okay. Does it mean this is something very new to you all, or how do you want to interact with it? Okay, Patience, I see your hand is still up. You can go ahead. I'm not sure whether it's a new hand or it's been up for a while, but go ahead.
I'm planning on using coding to simplify my data when I do it, because I'm still writing the proposal. But I know how they say you should code by using like that a theme word and grouping them, then finding a frequency. But I don't know like how to go about finding these codes. Do you create them for yourself, or I'm not quite sure, like, or does it go according to what I'm investigating and I choose that, okay, I want to just find probably this stress, anxiety, depressed, all those words, and then I count their frequency, or maybe there's this standard way of doing it, which I haven't found yet. So I'm not quite sure about that. Yes, that's my question. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Oh, sorry, I think Oh, I was sorry, I was muted. I was asking the question that does it mean then you need to still read a little bit more on coding, just as a technique of analysis of data, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, that makes sense. I think that's not necessarily a problem, because we all have to familiarize ourselves with the different techniques of analysis of data. So it sounds like in your case you will now spend some time really doing reading on the, how can I put it? I'm trying to put the right word. So maybe reading a little bit on the issues of coding. It's very important what you've just said, because then it means you are going to be spending time studying how to do it, so that by the time you get to it, and you're sitting with data, then it's not a mammoth task or a responsibility for you that can cause confusion. It's very important, because remember, when you do research design, and I think that's what somebody said, I'm not sure that it was Sakile. When you're doing a research design, that's where you set up your plan as to how you're going to collect data and how you're going to analyze data. So you don't get to data collected and now you're thinking, oops, I'm sitting with data now. How must I analyze it? So you do it during your research design. It's part of the plan in your proposal that I'm going to collect quantitative data and I'm going to analyze quantitative data. Otherwise, you're sitting with quantitative data and now you want to analyze quantitative data using qualitative analysis. That is not always a good way of planning. But for now, I think we're going to have to agree that well, I see it says we've got 5 minutes left. Oh, thank you, Godfrey. I think for now we need to agree with each. It means you've got the data collection method that is both quantitative and qualitative, and also that you're now going to use both methods in your analysis. So you'll have a quantitative data analysis method and you'll have a qualitative data analysis method, so that you don't end up with, you don't end up confusing yourself that you're now sitting with qualitative data, yet you've got quantitative analysis. So you need to decide what is going to be my quantitative collection of data method, and therefore, how am I going to analyze quantitative data? What is going to be my qualitative data analysis method, and how am I going to conduct qualitative data analysis? That is basically the trick of research, that you need to make sure that you've got processes that fit both quantitative and qualitative, where you are going to be using any one of those. I'm going to pause here and allow you now to engage us in the few seconds left before I hand over back to Godfrey. Any comment from any one of you in relation to what we've just discussed? Otherwise, what I'm going to say is that for our session today, we really tried to cover the data collection, both quantitative and qualitative, the questionnaire, the interview, the focus group, the analysis of both quantitative and qualitative data. And I think when we meet again, then we will talk more about the different data analysis techniques more in details, and maybe data collection techniques more in detail, because it's very important that when you sit with data, you need to be able to make use of that data for purposes of analyzing it and writing a report about it. This is the most important part of any research project. Any comment, any question, any concern from your side? Okay, I don't see a hand. I don't see a hand.
I have a question.
Yes, please Go ahead, Pamela.
Actually, it's two questions. I want to know whether in my method section, I should go into detail about how I'm going to code, different methods I'm going to use for coding while I haven't yet collected my data yet. And I also want to know if it's okay to use two different data analysis methods for the same research.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand your question, but maybe repeat it. I need to understand it properly.
Okay, the
You want
first
to know?
question is that as I'm writing my methodology section, is it
Yes.
important for me to write the different coding methods, the coding method I'm going to use in detail, or I can just say I'm going to be using coding and then writing frequencies and all that just as it is, or I need to go deeper into writing about how I'm going to code, as you've mentioned that there are different methods of coding. So
Yes,
do I need
it
to
is.
go and research that and then find these different methods and say which one I prefer?
Yes, it's important to put the details. You know, I won't say like all the details up front, because it's important for for the one who's going to look at your work to begin to understand what, how much you've read about the method that you're going to use. It saves you time, but it also prepares you so that when you do the analysis, then you don't have to go back. You just remember in the methodology or in the design, if you have put in those details, then at the time when you get to it, it really is just to implement the method. So the more you read at the early stages of it, the better. If that helps, Pamela.
Yes, it helps. For the second question, is it okay to use two methods?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong in using two methods or more, because remember, it's about what is the research the research question that you are trying to answer. So I don't know what will be the research question that you are answering, but there's nothing wrong in using two methods, really.
Okay, thank you.
Because it's called a mixed methods. So mixed methods is fine, but as I said, I don't know. We don't know your how can I put it? Your research problem that you are trying to solve. So, but there's nothing. If you use mixed method, you are strengthening your research investigation.
Okay, because I'm investigating the different psychological stresses that young adults experience during the pandemic. So it's a qualitative study, and both the analysis methods I'm considering are both qualitative. So it's not like it's a quantitative and a qualitative. So this other one, it's discourse, so it uses codes and frequencies, and then this one is more about summaries. So I'm not sure if it's the correct thing to do or not.
Okay. We will have to come back to that discussion. For now, I think my minute is gone. Let me allow Godfrey to wrap up. Otherwise, I'm well over time from his schedule. But thank you very much for the participation, and my apologies if I was a bit abrupt. We will meet again and we will have more discussion, because we will still repeat the discussion on collection and analysis. Godfrey? But it's been quite a very enriching discussion as far as I'm concerned.